In my view, if every one of the gods that have been discredited, instead of only the 2 or 3 left to us that haven't yet been completely shown up as man-made fabrications and joined Thor and Ashtaroth and Huitzilopochtli and the Aztecs and all the others, if all of these were proven to be fraudulent and false and man-made, I believe our moral dilemmas would be exactly the ones we face now. All of us, atheist, agnostic, philosophical, Socratic, or true believer. We would still have to wonder about the purpose of our existence here. We would still have to wonder about the origins of the cosmos and of nature. We would still have to wonder about our duties to one another. We would still have to wonder about how to build the just city, how to reflect on truth and on beauty. All of these dilemmas would remain exactly the way they are, unaltered by any supernatural dimension. It's a problem principally because it is man-made, because to an extent it is true, as the church used to preach when it had more confidence, that we are, in some sense, originally sinful and guilty. If you want to prove that, you only have to look at the many religions that people have constructed to see that they are indeed the product of an imperfectly evolved primate species, about half a chromosome away from a chimpanzee, with a prefrontal lobe that's too small, an adrenaline gland that's too big, and various other evolutionary deformities about which we're finding out ever more. A species that is predatory, a species that's very fearful of itself and others and of the natural order, and above all, very, very willing, despite its protestations of religious modesty, to be convinced that the operations of the cosmos and the universe are all operating with us in mind. Make up your mind whether you want to be modest or not. But don't say that you are made out of dust, or if you're a woman, out of a bit of rib, or if you're a Muslim, out of a clot of blood, and you're an abject sinner born into guilt. But add, nonetheless, let's cheer up. The whole universe is still designed with you in mind. This is not modesty or humility. It's a man-made false consolation, in my judgment, and it does great moral damage. It warps, it begins by warping what we might call our moral sense of proportion. There is, whether you are a materialist or a supernaturalist, no particular reason to say that human life has any enormous innate value. After all, religion disposes of people in heaps and mounds and says, go out, we depart into eternal fire, you're dust, you're nothing. If you don't have our faith, you're nothing less than nothing, you're worse, or evil, wicked, so forth. So it's not as if by assuming a God, you suddenly find that life is all worthwhile after all. If it was that simple, we wouldn't have to be having this discussion. I think this, essentially, I ask myself, why do I care? Why do I care not just about myself and my children, but why do I think I often care in general? Well, if I didn't, I wouldn't belong to a species that would have got this far. It may sound a platitudinous answer, but I think there's some force to it. If we didn't have human solidarity, if we didn't realize that we are brothers and sisters one with another, that we have responsibilities, duties to one another, that these are not merely reciprocal in evolutionary terms, in other words, you be nice to me, I'll look out for you, but that they can involve real ties, real bonds of affection, friendship, even love. If we didn't know that we were able to think like that, we exempt quite a large minority of humans who are born without this, the sociopaths and psychopaths, who I suppose we have to concede are also made in God's image, if you accept that tautology. It leaves nothing really unexplained. That would tell us why we had warm feelings for one another, and also explain why we were here instead of having joined the species that went, all the other ones, that went out of business, under the same divine supervision, I might add, including humanoid species like the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals, who it's quite clear buried each other with care and with love, looked out for one another, and so forth and so on, but somehow didn't make some divine grade. Do you see where I'm going with this? I do hope so. Pascal knew that there were always people, there would always be people, always had been people, who are constitutionally incapable of believing this stuff, can't be brought to believe it. And one of his cruder attempts to break down resistance of people like myself was this. He said, look, what have you got to lose? Say you believe in God, and if he does exist, you have a chance of his favor. If you go ahead like this and say he doesn't, what if he does exist? You lose everything. That's it. I don't think I've condensed it in any unfair way. That's it. That's why it's called Pascal's wager. Sometimes called Pascal's gambit, in fact, by mathematicians, but it has the correct echo to me precisely of the huckster on the racetrack saying, how can you lose? Have I got a bet for you? Can you imagine anything cheaper, really, or more sordid? The two things that it assumes, needs to assume, are these. One, a fantastically cynical God who's also a bloody fool. I mean, a nasty and cynical person who's also so thick that he would be fooled by me saying, tell you what, on the flip coin that you exist and I need a break, I'll say I believe in you. Says, oh, I'm really impressed now. You've just undergone a moral transformation. This Blaise Pascal is considered in the first rank of Christian thinkers, I might add. The second thing it assumes, of course, is the most corrupt and vulgar kind of consumer, the sort of person who would fall for a deal like that and would think, that would be nice. I'll bet correctly. I hope you'll forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, for mentioning this, because I don't at all want to invoke my own particular case in an attempt to gain your sympathy. I'll say it as objectively as I can. Some of you may have read that I'm not very well and may not have very long to live. I find it particularly objectionable that this wager, which Pascal offers to anyone at any time in their life, to be fair to him, tends to be pressed on you all the time, if you don't look as if you're going to last very long, by people who say, surely that now you might be frightened and not feeling at your best and afraid of a smelly and a disgusting end. Surely this would be the perfect moment to repudiate all the convictions of a lifetime. For some reason, that comes naturally to a lot of people of faith. I don't mind for myself, but I think it's the vilest kind of bullying to inflict on people in hospital and people who are in extremis. People have the nerve to ask me, well, if you don't believe in heaven and hell, what gives your life meaning? Do you not detect a slight insult as well as a slight irrationality to that question? You mean I'd have much more meaning in my life if I thought that I would die and I'd be given one chance, or would have been given while I was alive, one chance, and if I'd made a mistake, I'd be condemned eternally. That was the kind of judge I'd be facing. And in the meantime, it would be advisable to live my life in propitiation of this supernatural dictator. That would lend more meaning to my life than my view counter to Pascal, contra Pascal, that if there's any such judge, I'll be able to say, at least I never faked belief in you in order to win your approbation, sir, or ma'am, as the case might be. And if you are as reported, you'll have detected that those were my thoughts, and at least I wasn't a hypocrite. Pascal says, no, at least pretend you believe. It's win-win. This is corrupt reasoning. It's the reasoning of a huckster. And it lends no meaning to life at all. Still, why do I care? For example, why do I care? Why do I care about Rwanda? Why do I care about my Iranian friends fighting theocracy? Why do I give up my own time to them? Well, I'll tell you why. And I say it, I suppose, at the risk of embarrassment. It gives me great pleasure to do so. I like to feel that since we only have one life to live, that I can help people make it free as best I can and assist them in their real struggle for liberty, which in its most essential form is the struggle against theocracy, which is the original form that dictatorship and violation of human rights actually takes. If William Wilberforce was indeed animated by Christianity in his campaign against slavery, he should have been, because it was about time that there was a Christian who said that this trade had gone on long enough. And any Christian should have felt responsible for saying so, because for the entire period of its existence, slavery and the slave trade had been justified directly by reference to the Christian religion and by direct references to the warrant for slavery that's contained in Holy Writ and in Scripture. And that's why we like the captain who wrote Amazing Grace, because he'd been the captain of a slave ship. And he was just as much of a Christian when he was doing the first thing as he was when he was doing the second. The chances, though, that a member of the American Anti-Slavery Society, Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, the others was not a Christian would be extremely high. The chances that until very, very, very late in the 19th century, a defender of slavery would be a Christian were statistically enormous. It therefore proves absolutely nothing about Christianity that some of its members finally turned against one of their foulest practices and impositions. And if I was a Christian, I would avoid this argument very carefully as tending to show that there is no basis in faith for morality, that our morality is innate to us. And it's very nice when sometimes religion catches up to morality for a change. Thank you. If you allow faith schools, we'll allow them to have their faith schools. Cultural suicide. Cultural suicide. Don't let it happen to you. Don't let it happen where you live. Look how wonderfully it worked. You know it very well. What happened in Northern Ireland when it was allowed to segregate Protestant and Catholic schools. After all, they have different faiths. Oh, they do? I thought they were both Christian. I can't arbitrate this. No, they should have separate schools. They should never meet, never intermarry, never socialize. Beautifully that worked out. And how? Now let's have it for Jews and Muslims too on the mainland. Let them all lie to their children. Let them all give their special myth. Let them all say to them that they're different. Let them not tell them that they're members of a civil society or a country or a nation. Let them denominate themselves by faith. Can't wait to see what happens. I think I know what's coming. I don't want my beloved country of birth to be turned into some f***ing Lebanon by people of faith. I don't want it. I'm going to fight it too. And you should get ready to fight it when they try it in your case. Don't allow this. Putting the word faith in front of something is no excuse for barbarism and cruelty and ignorance and stupidity, just as putting the word reverend in front of a stupid name like Falwell or Sharpton doesn't mean you should be on MSNBC. Learn to resist it because you're going to need to.
Well, Christopher,
this is about you.
I'm right there with.
If you'd like to support me in creating more of these types of videos, you can do so by donating to the channel through our Patreon page. This will also give you early access to videos and channel updates. You will also get access to our Discord server, where you can participate in discussions and debates with other members of our community. You can check it out by clicking the link in the video description.